Welcome to our study on the book of Ruth. Today we're going to be looking at the first chapter, the first 5 verses of this Old Testament short book that's just packed with so much truth and beauty. We're going to start by asking this question. Have you ever seen Mosaic artwork? There's something that's captivating about them. The way that each piece is imperfect yet perfectly fits into a bigger picture creates a beauty to behold. The book of Ruth is a mosaic, one of the finest pieces of literature that's ever been written. In fact, even noted Bible teacher John MacArthur went as far as to say that what Venus is to statues and the Mona Lisa is to paintings, the book of Ruth is to literature. So why do we call Ruth a mosaic? Why study this seemingly parenthetical book that's only 4 chapters long and Yahweh, the Lord, is only mentioned twice as actively working? Well, it's been noted that very little has changed in the creation of Mosaic since they first arrived in Europe from Mesopotamia around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Their hard-wearing nature has earned them the nickname of eternal pictures. And we can still see some of the earliest examples today. In short, the story of Ruth is a mosaic in the sovereignty of God, His kindness and His redemption, an eternal picture of these truths. There is no more beautiful picture seen through imperfect pieces that fit together beautifully to teach us how wonderful the love of God, His provision and faithfulness to us are. And so we jump right into the reading of Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathrites from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So we pick up in the first verse, in the days when the judges ruled, that gives us our setting to the book of Ruth. The author is unknown, but some do attribute it to Samuel, writing after David had become king, given the genealogy at the end of the book. However, the author is a master craftsman with the pen, and the truths he shares are timeless. The time of Judges was a time for the people of God where political, spiritual, and social unrest reigned. As a roller coaster ascends and descends, turning every which way, so too were the lives of the people of God, and it was the product of them doing what was right in their own eyes. Their 2 prominent leaders, Moses and Joshua, have died when the book of Judges begins, which begins a cycle throughout the entire period of Judges, around 1370 BC to 1041 BC, of rebellion and redemption. In Judges 2:16 through 17, we see that the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of those that plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned their back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. In fact, the final verse of the book of Judges sums up the entire book into one commentary. And it says this: in those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is the time frame where we meet the characters in the book of Ruth. with the plausible setting being during the reign of Jair from around 1105 BC. You can find that in Judges 10:3-5. The author then moves on from the time frame and introduces us to the people that would take place in this story. He says that a man of Bethlehem in Judah, he and his wife and his 2 sons, the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. The name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Now Bethlehem we know, but what's important here is that this family is from a place, Bethlehem, that literally means house of bread. Their family clan, the Ephrathites, is significantly direct descendants from the line of Judah, the same Judah who seduced and impregnated his daughter-in-law Tamar, producing Perez in Genesis 38. These clans, a type of extended family, were a significant factor in contributing family lines throughout the Old Testament and Jewish history. And the messiness in which this line descends, as we'll see, creates one of those imperfect pieces perfectly placed within the sovereignty of God in order to show his favor, kindness, and grace to his people. The narrator then introduces for us a problem. He says that there was a famine in the land in Bethlehem. Think about this. The house of bread has no bread. The irony is heavy. But the truth is, famine was a working of God, either as a divine punishment for chasing idols or for furthering his purpose, as it did in the case of Joseph. Another messy situation. Elimelech has a family that he cannot feed in a place known for the provision of God. He's at a crossroads and has a choice to make, and he chose poorly. He went to sojourn in the country of Moab. Let's start at the beginning of Moab, Genesis 19:30-37. Now Lot went up out of Zoar, lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters, and the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there's no man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father." So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn lay with him. And the process repeats for the younger in the second night. And the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. And he is the father of the Moabites today. If that's not messy, I don't know what is. Not only this, but the Moabites are strong traditional rivals of Israel who worship and serve the god Chemosh, one who only blessed when they did well, even requiring human sacrifices for his blessing. This is the land that Elimelech chose to live in with his family because famine had struck Bethlehem. Instead of waiting for the provision of God, he sought his own desire and worried more about providing for his family financially than spiritually. This is a failure in leadership as a father. It must be remembered that if we trust in God, then we must trust in him also in the messy times, that he's still sovereign, that he's still working for our good, not taking matters into our own hands, trying to play God for ourselves. Elimelech did, and it didn't go well for him. Which brings us to the hurt of the story. The author records, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died. It's not noted whether or not Elimelech died immediately or soon after arriving in Moab, or if it was a result of his sin, but we do know from Scripture that all have sinned and that the wages of that sin is death. Thus, not only had God passed down judgment through a famine in the land of bread, but also he took the life of Elimelech while he was a foreigner in a rebellious and sinful land. Now, it makes sense to look at this from Naomi's perspective. And she was left with her 2 sons, the author notes. These took Moabite wives, and the name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. If you want to see the impact of a father who isn't following God, look to this example. Through the structure of the sentence, it can be implied that the 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, which some have noted means sick and dying, not the best names to give sons, married 2 Moabite women after the death of their father. Did his absence lead to the indulgence in their life? Two men who are surrounded by foreign women, part of a group who were known for seducing Israelites to begin with, and they had not the wisdom of their father to direct them. Men, hear this. There's no substitute in your sons and daughters' lives than the example you set and the wisdom that you bring them. Both of Elimelech's sons took Moabite wives. Now, in Naomi's shoes, think of how she's feeling. She too is in a foreign land, one that is unknown. And we don't know how long they were there before she was widowed and her provider is gone. He's already led her into a desperate situation in Moab, but now she is without a husband to provide for her financially, which was the reason that they were there in the first place. The irony is palpable. But this is just the beginning. The author notes that they lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. The narrator very quickly fast forwards an entire decade with nothing of significance to report within those 10 years. Then another tragedy. Both of Naomi's sons, Ruth and Orpah's husbands, die. There's no reason given, but the scene is now set. 3 women, all widowed, and 0 prospects. The whole situation is a mess. Ultimately, the hurt leads to the clear problem that needs to be fixed for Naomi, which is a financial need and a family need. She's widowed, buried both of her sons, and is living with 2 foreign women who culturally they should have never married. She's devastated, and as we'll see, blames God. As we end this session, I want to focus on 2 characters because their story is our story. See, as the mosaic of God's sovereignty and redemption are being carefully crafted and placed together, a masterpiece results. Taking Elimelech and Ruth, the title character, we see our story, and in a way, we see the beginning of the gospel. Through Ruth, we see the doctrine of original sin. The curse has been placed on all of us by Adam's negligence in Genesis 3, being born into sin. This sin separates us from God, creating a chasm that we cannot traverse by our own doing. And through Elimelech, we also see our penchant for idolatry and sin. If left to our natural desires, we will always do what is right in our own eyes. We'll chase after comfort when the mess comes. Instead, we must fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who lived the life we should have lived and died the death that we should have died to rise again and bring redemption as the beautiful mosaic of God's redemption and masterpiece are on full display. We'll see you next week as we continue this study in Ruth.